Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Marked twice, loved once. Episode 10. Chapter 111. Alpha Leo's POV. You can come in, Alpha, Lewis said, and I nodded, standing to my feet as I took the stairs to the room. I could hear Ethan's disapproving growl at what I was about to do, but I knew it would be the best for her. What about you? What about your feelings for her? Do you think you'll be able to live without her? She's our mate, for goddess's sake, Ethan growled. He was right with every word, but I chose to ignore him. I sucked in a deep breath, composing myself for what I was about to do, and then pushed the door open. I stepped in and closed the door behind me, turning to see Nora seated on the bed, her enchanting sea blue eyes locked onto mine. It was a bittersweet sight, knowing that this might be the last time we would see each other like this. But I had made up my mind, and I knew it was the right decision. I walked further into the room and noticed Madison standing at the window, staring at Nora. "Don't do it," Ethan pleaded, but I chose to ignore him again. "How are you doing, Nora? I just came back from Singapore and decided to come check on you when I heard you were back," I said calmly and reluctantly. Nora held my gaze for a long period of time, searching for the right words to say, and finally, she spoke. "Were you aware that I was kidnapped?" she asked, and I sucked in a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, but I was aware, and you could have helped." She cut in. "You could have helped a lot with your connections and abilities, Alpha Leo. They even got someone that could teleport. You could have helped if you wanted to, but you chose not to." "Yes, I didn't want to help. In fact, I chose not to help," I yelled back, totally ignoring the ache in my heart. "You chose Madison over me. Just a day that you thought I was dead, you rushed into his arms and let him mark you. He is your rightful mate and should be able to save you." I spat. "What?" Nora said, tears clouding her eyes. I could see the pain and confusion in her expression, but I couldn't let it deter me from my decision. I needed to stick to my plan. "Nora," I continued, my voice filled with a mix of anger and hurt, "when you thought I was gone, you rushed into his arms, letting him mark you as his mate and mated with him. How could you move on so quickly?" Nora's face contorted with anguish, and she struggled to find her voice amidst her tears. "Leo, I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you forever. I couldn't bear the pain, and Madison. He helped me through it. I didn't know you were still alive," she yelled, and I scoffed. "Stop this act, Nora. You still haven't forgiven me for what happened, and you will never forgive me, Nora. You were just enjoying the attention you were getting from both of us," I accused, and this time I saw her flare with anger. "Really?" she asked as she got down from the bed and slowly approached me. "You think I was just enjoying all this?" she asked, and I looked away, searching for the right words to use to end this. It was getting out of control, and I didn't know how long I could keep up with this act. Maybe Madison is right. I never loved you. Maybe I just didn't want Madison to get you. I tried to speak, and she cut me off. "Well, he has me now," she said, and I took a deep breath. "Of course, he has her now." I looked into Nora's tear-filled eyes, my heart breaking at the sight. Deep down, I knew my words were hurting her, but I had to stay strong and push forward with my plan. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. "I'm pregnant with Madison's baby," she said, and I clenched my fists, struggling to hold back my own tears. "Wow, congratulations! I was expecting to hear this, but not so soon, I said, and saw her frown deepen. And we are getting married, she added. Alpha Leo's POV. I felt my heartbeat cease in my chest as she declared her words to me. Yes, I knew she was pregnant, but her words just made me realize that I was truly losing her. Don't agree to it, Ethan pleaded, but I ignored him and said the most painful words I could ever say. That's nice, so I think we should get down to the rejection process, I said, observing her eyes flutter in shock as she processed my words. Obviously, she wasn't expecting such a response from me. Reject me, Nora, and I'll do the same, I declared, ignoring the pain in my chest. Nora held my gaze with mixed emotions in her eyes: pain, anger, and hatred, all directed at me. You, she sucked in a deep breath and tightly shut her eyes for a moment before slowly opening them, maintaining her gaze with an unreadable expression. I'm going to reject you, but not today, she said, and I gulped. I'm pregnant and can't endanger the life of this baby, she announced. I'll reject you after my delivery, but until then, Alpha Leo, I don't want to see you ever in my life, she spat, and I gulped, swallowing the pain in my heart. Please leave, she said and walked into the bathroom attached to the room. I held the gaze of Madison, who had an unreadable expression on his face. It was obvious he didn't know what to feel. With a deep breath, I walked over to him and flashed a weak smile before speaking. Congrats, bro. You have her now. Promise me you will take care of her, I said, and Madison just stared at me. If you need any help in the future, don't hesitate to call me, I added. I turned to leave, but his words stopped me. Why, Leo? Why are you doing this? He asked, causing me to turn and hold his gaze. Because I love Nora so much that I'm willing to give her up just so she will be happy and not distressed, I paused and took a step closer. And because you are my brother, and I want you to be happy, I smiled weakly. I turned to leave, and this time he didn't stop me. With a heavy heart, I descended the stairs, left the apartment, and got into the back seat of the car. Heartbroken and in pain, I leaned my head on the headrest and slowly closed my eyes. As I rested my head on the headrest of the car, tears welled up in my eyes, streaming down my cheeks. The pain in my chest became unbearable, and I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. The weight of losing Nora, and the realization that I would never be a part of her life again, crushed me. Uncontrollable sobs racked my body, and my shoulders shook with each wave of grief. The tears fell relentlessly, mingling with the turmoil of emotions coursing through me. It felt as if a part of me was being torn apart, ripped away without any hope of repair. Every breath I took was accompanied by a painful ache. I clutched my chest, trying to ease the throbbing pain, but it only intensified. The tears continued to flow, blurring my vision and causing my whole body to tremble. Are you okay, Alpha? Jackson, my personal driver, asked in a worried tone, but I ignored his questions and took out a handkerchief to wipe the tears away. I'm Alpha Leo, and I shouldn't be seen crying. With a deep breath, I composed myself and remained numb until the car pulled up to the mansion. I got out of the car and made my way inside without responding to the greetings of the servants and men. As I walked into the sitting room, I found Ava seated on the couch, having a drink with my mother. The moment she noticed my presence, she quickly stood up and respectfully bowed her head. Son, you're back, Mother paused and shot me a worried gaze. What happened? She asked through the mind link, but I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at Ava and said, "Come with me." I told her and started walking away. She followed behind me as we entered my study room. I walked in, and she closed the door behind her. "Have a seat," I gestured, and she took the seat while I sat across from her. We both remained silent for a moment until she spoke. "Are you okay, Alpha Leo? You don't look good," she said, and I sighed, bracing myself. "I'm fine, Ava. You don't have to worry," I said, but she still went on to ask, "Is it about her?" she inquired, but I didn't answer. "I can help if you, Ava," I interrupted. "Stop. I'm fine, and that's not why I called you here," I said, and I saw her nod. We both fell silent again until I spoke. "You helped us a lot in rescuing Nora, and now I want to give you anything you want to show my appreciation. Tell me what you want, land, money, just mention it," I said, waiting for her to respond. But she remained silent for a moment. Finally, she spoke in a calm yet determined tone. "Alpha Leo, I appreciate your gratitude and your willingness to offer me anything I desire. However, there's nothing material that I seek from you. My purpose has always been to serve and protect the pack, to assist in any way I can." Her words made me hold her gaze with curiosity. "Surely, you will need something," I said, and she weakly smiled before saying, "When we met at the club, I told you I'm from this pack but left due to some reason," she said, and I nodded. She continued, her voice quivering. "You see, when I was just a child, my father passed away unexpectedly. It was a devastating blow for my mother and me. My mother eventually remarried, but little did we know that our lives would take a turn for the worse," she said, and I raised a brow. "My stepfather, who was one of your father's gammas, seemed kind and caring at first. But a few years into their marriage, he found his true mate who despised my mother's presence. She saw my mother as a threat, a rival for my stepfather's affections. Things escalated quickly. One fateful night, my stepfather's mate confronted my mother, threatening her with violence and even death. In a moment of desperation, my mother vowed to protect herself and said she would kill her before she had a chance to harm her. Tragically, the next morning, my stepfather's mate was found dead. The circumstances surrounding her death were mysterious, and suspicion fell upon my mother. Despite her protests of innocence, all fingers pointed at her. The pack accused her of murder, and your father, the Alpha, believed the accusations without question," she said, and I sighed. "The aftermath was brutal. Both my mother and I were subjected to beatings, not just physical but emotional as well." She sniffed, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy for her. "I and my mother were banished from this pack, but I do come here often because of my abilities, and it seems everyone has forgotten about us, including you," she said, and I raised a brow. "Alpha Leo," she called out to me. "Don't you remember me?" she asked, while I furrowed my brow, confused by her words. "It's me, Ava, the tiny little thing," she said with a chuckle, and I became even more confused. "Do I know you?" I asked, and she nodded. "Yes, we've met once, but I was just 11, she responded with a smile. "I'm the girl you saved from being bullied on a Saturday morning. I was running an errand for my mother when a group of boys cornered me and began throwing insults at me, calling me a fatherless child. Fortunately, you were out jogging, and you stopped and commanded the 3 boys to let me be. When they refused, you kicked their asses, and they ran away," she chuckled and continued, "after they ran away, you turned to leave, but then you turned back to me and said, 'Tiny little thing, go home.'" She smiled. Those words always ring in my head, no matter how hard I try to forget them. Memories slowly resurfaced in my mind. The incident she described seemed familiar, but it had been so long ago. I was probably 14, so I hadn't recognized her at first. The girl I called a tiny little thing looked small and fragile, but the girl seated before me was a completely transformed person. I didn't recognize you, but now that you've reminded me, I do remember that day. I'm glad I could help you back then. Ava smiled, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. Thank you, Alpha Leo. Your act of kindness meant the world to me. And now I want to repay that kindness by being by your side and working for you. Please, Alpha Leo, make me one of your faithful, she pleaded, and I heaved a deep breath. You said your mother was innocent? I asked, and she nodded. Very well then, not only will you work with me, but I will uncover the truth behind the death of your stepfather's mate. If it is discovered that someone else was responsible and that person is still alive, I will grant you the privilege to decide their punishment. I stated, observing as Ava collapsed to the ground and lowered her head to the floor. Thank you, Alpha. Thank you. Nora's POV. I could feel my heart clenched in my chest as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. No more crying because of him. All my life, he has brought me nothing but pain, but this time I won't let him. I won't let him make me shed more tears. Nora. Madison called out anxiously. You have to open this door and let me in, or I'll have to break it myself, he said, worry evident in his voice. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging within me. After that, I went for the door. When I opened the door, I saw Madison standing before me, his worried eyes searching mine for answers. I knew he cared deeply for me, and in that moment, I realized that he was the one who had always been there for me, even when others had let me down. Without uttering a word, I fell into his arms, seeking solace and comfort. At first, he seemed taken aback by my sudden embrace, but soon he wrapped his arms around me and gently stroked my hair, providing a sense of security and warmth. You're going to be fine, Lord Madison whispered, his voice filled with reassurance. I'm here for you. I'm your mate, and I will take care of you. His words resonated within me, slowly soothing the ache in my heart. Madison had proven time and again that he was there to support me, to love me unconditionally. It was time for me to reciprocate that love and accept his proposal. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to meet his. Madison, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Thank you for always being there for me. Thank you for loving me despite all my flaws and pain. He gently cupped my face in his hands and wiped away a stray tear that had escaped down my cheek. His touch was gentle yet firm, a silent reassurance that he would never hurt me like others had done before. Nora, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I love you more than words can express. You're my everything, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. What you said to Leo, was it true? Are you really going to marry me? His words took me by surprise, but deep down, I knew that I wanted to spend my life with him. I had spent so much time dwelling on the past, letting the pain consume me, but Madison had shown me that there was so much more to life. A smile slowly spread across my face as I nodded, tears of joy now streaming down my cheeks. Yes, Lord Madison, I replied, my voice filled with determination. I will marry you and be your queen. I choose happiness, I choose love, and I choose us. Madison's eyes sparkled with joy as he leaned in and gently kissed my forehead. Thank you so much, Nora. I promise to love you and our baby. You don't know how happy I am. I thought I would lose you, he said, but I cut him off with a kiss. Stop talking, I said, and he kissed me again, this time more passionately. My body ached in anticipation, and I couldn't believe how just his kiss could have this much effect on me. I wrapped my hands around his neck as he continued to kiss me. He picked me up and laid me on the bed, still kissing me. My lips parted, giving him access to slip his tongue in. He explored my mouth with his tongue, and I didn't hesitate to explore his with mine. He trailed kisses down my neck, and I placed my hand on his shoulder, urging him to kiss me deeper and take things further. I pulled away from the kiss and stared into his eyes. He was breathing heavily, and I wrapped my hands around his neck again, gazing into his eyes. "I want you," I muttered, but he shook his head. "I can't have relation with you now, Nora. You just woke up from being unconscious, you must be really weak," he answered, and I pouted. "I'm awake and I have recovered," I complained, and he smiled and placed a kiss on my forehead before looking at me. "I'm going to give you something else that's better than X," he said with a mischievous smile that caused my body to ache for his touch. I couldn't wait to see what he would do to me, and my body couldn't either. "What are you going to do?" I asked, and he smirked and began undressing me while he stared until. After he was done, he turned to me, smiling, and then sealed his lips with mine before pulling away. This was even better than the first time. "You've learned so fast," he said, and I chuckled. "I'm a writer, remember?" I said, and he smiled, pulling me back onto the bed, resting my head on his chest. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest as his breathing became steady, and with a smile, I opened my mouth to speak. "I love you," I whispered in a low tone but audible enough for him to hear. Alpha Leo's POVA knock landed on the door, and without waiting for my response, the door opened, revealing a glint of light in the dark room. I heard footsteps as the person walked up to me, but I couldn't see him or her, only their shadow. The shadow stopped approaching me and instead walked in another direction in the room. Before I could process what was happening, all the lights in the room were switched on, causing a frown to appear on my face. Rubbing my eyes with a frown, I opened them and realized it was my mother. A groan escaped my lips because I knew why she was here. "Leo," she spoke in a worried tone as she made her way towards me. I responded with a frown and emptied the glass of whiskey into my mouth. "Can I speak to you?" she pleaded, but I didn't respond. I watched her take the couch before me and held my gaze for a brief moment before speaking. "What are you doing to yourself?" she questioned, but I didn't give her a response. Instead, I refilled my glass. "It's been a week now. You can't keep doing this to yourself," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. "Take a grip of yourself. It's not the end of the world, it's the end of my world," I cut in. She was my world, she was everything to me. I loved her more than my life. I spoke bitterly as pain consumed me, and it took everything in me to stop myself from breaking down in tears. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and slowly calmed my emotions before opening them. I held Mother's gaze and saw the concern and worry on her face, which I despised. "How is your wolf? Has he started communicating with you?" she asked, and I responded with a sigh, gulping down a large quantity of whiskey. "Mother, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me," I said, but she frantically shook her head. "Leo, you are not fine, you look terrible. When did you last look in the mirror?" she asked, and I sighed and emptied the glass of whiskey in my hand. "You have to stop this, Leo. You are an alpha, a leader of the pack. Thousands of people depend on you and your directions. You can't keep yourself locked up in here, wallowing in pain and misery." I stared at Mother, her words sinking in slowly. She was right, of course. As the alpha of my pack, I had a responsibility to them. But right now, I couldn't bring myself to care about anything else. The loss had shattered me, and the pain was consuming every part of my being. I know I have responsibilities, Mother, I replied, my voice laced with bitterness. But right now, I can't pretend like everything is okay. I can't just move on and forget about her. My mother sighed, her expression filled with sadness and concern. I understand your pain, Leo. Letting go of someone you love is never easy. But you can't let it destroy you. You have to find a way to heal and move forward. I scoffed at her words, feeling anger rising within me. Move forward? I can't, Mother. Mother's eyes softened, and she reached out to place a hand on mine. Leo, I'm not asking you to forget. I'm telling you to pick yourself up and move on. Besides, she paused for a moment and stretched out an envelope to me. Have it. She gestured, but I frowned and glared at the envelope in her hand. What is that, Mother? I asked. Why don't you go on and see for yourself, she urged, and reluctantly, I took the envelope from her, unsealed it, and read through its contents. When I read the first sentence, my breath seized in my chest and I couldn't read further. The invitation was given to me 2 days ago. Leo, Nora, and Madison are getting married this weekend. She has moved on, and you should do the same, Mother pleaded. I crumpled the invitation in my hand, tightening my grip on it as if trying to crush the pain it represented. Could you please leave, Mother? I pleaded, but she didn't budge. Please, Mother, I pleaded again, and she sighed and stood up. I hope you take a grip on yourself, Leo. With that, she turned and left. As she left, I pondered, wondering what I was doing to myself. I was here wallowing in pain while she was probably out there having fun, while I was drowning in sorrow. With a sigh, I slowly rose from the seat. I looked around the spacious bedroom and saw bottles of alcohol scattered on the floor. I moved away from the couch and stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection. I couldn't believe it was me standing there. I looked disheveled, my hair was overgrown, and my beard looked unkempt. With a frown, I began taking off my clothes. After undressing, I walked into the bathroom, picked up a shaving stick, and started shaving. Once I finished, I took a cold bath and wrapped a towel around my waist before leaving the bathroom. I walked out of the bathroom and headed straight to the room attached to mine, which I used as my closet. I switched on the lights, stared at the clothes before me, and without making a choice, I picked up a black button-up long-sleeve shirt, black pants, and black footwear. I walked back to my room, laid them on the bed, and blow-dried my hair before combing it. I applied lotion to my body, sprayed some spray, put on my underwear, and then dressed up. After getting dressed, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I knew it was going to be hard for me to bear, but I'm Leo, and I can move past any situation, even this. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and left the room. As I descended the stairs to the living room, I noticed the stunned but excited look on the faces of the servants. This was the first time they were seeing me in a week. As I walked past them, they lowered their heads in respect, but I ignored it. I arrived in the sitting room and met Mother and Ava. Greetings, Alpha, Ava greeted, and I nodded and took a seat. I could see the relieved look on Mother's face as she stared at me with a warm smile. I'm fine, Mother, I announced to her, and she nodded. I shifted my gaze to Ava, who also had a smile on her face. I'm glad you're back, she said, and I hummed and stood up, with Ava following suit. Do you want to go somewhere? I can teleport you there, she suggested, but I shook my head and said, walk with me. I told her, and she nodded, following me. We left the mansion and began strolling around the park. Anyone who saw me smiled and greeted me. It wasn't usual to see me walking around. Alpha Leo, young kids screamed excitedly, and I couldn't stop myself from smiling at them. Their smiles were so captivating that I found myself smiling back at them. You should smile often, it suits you, Ava spoke, but I didn't respond. We walked until I led her to my personal woods. As we ventured deeper into the forest, I stopped and began to undress. I noticed her gulp and turn away. After undressing, I shifted into my wolf form and saw that she had also transformed into her wolf. Beautiful was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw the wolf before me. Is something wrong? Ava asked through telepathy, noticing my stare. No, let's race to the mountains, I said and started running. I could hear her heavy footsteps behind me, but she was no match for me. We raced until I reached the mountains and saw her racing towards me, reaching the mountains as well. I could have just used my teleporting abilities, she growled, and I couldn't help but smirk. Let's race back, I communicated through telepathy, and we began racing once again. Once more, I emerged as the winner. When we returned to where our clothes were, we turned our backs to each other and shifted back into our human forms. I dressed up and turned to see her wearing her hoodie, but before I could fully turn, I noticed a mark on her shoulder. I became curious and waited for her to turn so I could inquire about it. Is something wrong, Alpha? She asked, and I shook my head. The mark on your shoulder, how did you get it? I asked, and I could tell she was taken aback by my question. Apologies, Alpha, but I don't wish to talk about it, she said, her mood changing completely. Sure, let's go then, I said and walked out of the woods. The walk back to the mansion was silent, neither of us uttered a word until we arrived. I request permission to take my leave. You can call me if needed, she said, and I nodded, watching her teleport away. As she left, I couldn't ignore the lingering feeling about the mark on her shoulder. Something doesn't feel right about it. Lord Madison's POV. I stood at the altar, feeling anxious and nervous. This wasn't the first time I had been in such a position, but this time it felt different. A few minutes from now, Nora was going to walk down the aisle, and I couldn't wait to see it. A series of emotions bubbled in me. I was excited, nervous, and panicked. My palms were literally sweating, while my gaze was fixed on the door, waiting for Nora to walk through. She's here, Darren announced to me, and I gulped. Slow, melodious orchestral music began to play, and behold, Nora stepped her feet into the church. The moment I saw her, I couldn't take my eyes off. She was dressed in the most gorgeous wedding dress I'd ever seen on anyone. Her hair was beautifully styled, and her face was glittering. Her steps were steady, yet I could sense the nervousness in her eyes, mirroring my own. She smiled at me as she got closer, and all I could do was smile back as I waited for her to reach me. When she reached where I stood, I took her hand from Maxwell and held her gaze. You are so beautiful, I said through the mind link and saw her blush. The priest continued with the wedding ceremony, speaking about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. We listened attentively, our eyes locked on each other. The vows and rings were exchanged as we promised to love and cherish each other for the rest of our lives. As the priest pronounced us husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. You may kiss your bride, the priest said, and I pulled Nora into a tender kiss and then pulled away. I held her gaze and saw that she was happy to be with me, and there was no doubt about it. "Thank you," I whispered, and she responded with a smile. We walked back down the aisle while the guests showered us with rose petals. As we walked outside the church, I caught a glimpse of Aunt standing beside Mother. She held my gaze and flashed me a weak smile, and then I thought of Leo. I wasn't expecting Aunt to come after sending an invitation, and seeing her made me really happy because she was important to me, and I wanted her to share in this joy with me. Nora and I took pictures with the guests before we entered the white limousine waiting for us. We sat beside each other, and I pulled her for another kiss, this time passionate and intense. After a moment, we pulled away, and Nora rested her head on my shoulder while we remained silent, but our hearts did the talking. "Are you happy?" I asked, breaking the silence. Nora lifted her head away from my shoulder and held my gaze. "Of course, I'm happy," she smiled and kissed me before pulling away. "And you? Are you happy?" she asked, and I smiled, placing a kiss on her forehead before cupping her cheek. "Words can't describe how happy I am," I spoke truthfully and smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "Stop it, you are going to ruin your makeup." "I don't want people to think I made my bride cry," I said, and she chuckled and took a deep breath. She placed her head on my shoulder and stared at the customized diamond ring on her finger. "It's beautiful," she said, and I hummed and kissed the ring on her finger. The drive fell into a comfortable silence until the car pulled up at the mansion, where the reception would be taking place in the garden. "I'll go in and change," Nora spoke, and I nodded and came out of the limousine before she did. She was escorted back to the mansion by her bridesmaid, Dora, while I made my way to the garden to welcome guests. "Congratulations, Lord Madison. I'm so happy that the moon goddess blessed you with a second chance mate. You truly deserve it," an alpha congratulated me with a handshake. I continued receiving congratulations from the guests until Aunt walked up to me with a warm smile. "Congratulations, son," she said, and I smiled and hugged her. "Thanks for coming. Your presence means a lot," I said as I pulled away. "Of course, I will never miss such an important day of your life," Aunt said, and I smiled. "I wish you a happy married life, son. Your home is blessed. You are lucky to have Nora, and she is lucky to have you." She patted my shoulder and made to leave, but I stopped her and asked her the question that has been bothering me. "Aunt, how is Leo?" I asked, and I caught a glint of sadness in her eyes, but she quickly wiped it off and replaced it with a weak smile. "Leo will be all right. Today is your special day, so don't think of anything else," she said, and with those words, she left, leaving me with my thoughts, which were full of guilt as I wondered if Nora would have agreed to get married to me had Leo not told those lies to her. While I was still lost in thought, I saw Nora walk in, dressed in a blue beaded long-fitted gown which revealed her enticing figure. I stared at her in awe as she slowly walked up to me. "You look breathtaking," I complimented, and saw her blush. I placed a kiss on her hand before taking her hand into mine and walked her to our seats. The reception progressed as Dora and Maxwell made their speeches about Nora and me and the love we shared. Nora and I were called to the stage, where we shared our first dance. She wrapped her hands around my shoulders, and I held her waist as we began to dance to the soft melodious music. I held Nora's gaze to see any glint of regret in her eyes, but I saw none. She had a big smile on her face, and I wished it would stay forever. "What are you thinking?" she asked, causing me to lean over to her right ear. "I just can't wait to undress you in this dress," I said and pulled away. She blushed at my words and shyly looked away. After we finished dancing, we shared a toast and began receiving congratulations from guests. Nora introduced me to her few guests, and I did the same. I noticed my mother coming up to me, and I wished I could ignore her, but Nora had already seen her approaching. "Congratulations," Mother congratulated as she stood before us. "Thank you, ma'am," Nora responded. "Please call me Cynthia," she said and took Nora's hand. "Welcome to the family, daughter-in-law." She smiled at Nora and looked my way. I could see a mix of emotions in her eyes: pain, regret, and loneliness. A part of me wanted to just hug her and tell her that I was no longer angry with her, but I withheld myself and kept an expressionless face. "I wish you all the happiness I couldn't give you," she said with a sad smile before leaving. Nora looked at me, and I knew she wanted to say so many things, but she let them be. The party came to an end, and we thanked our guests and bid our goodbyes before retreating to our room. When we entered our room, it was decorated with candles and red roses. I pulled Nora into a deep kiss, and she responded passionately before I pulled away. "Now I have you all to myself," I said, reaching for the back of her dress and starting to untie the strand on her back, maintaining eye contact as I saw her seductively lick her lips. "You are beautiful," I complimented, causing her to blush, and then I sealed her lips with mine. After a moment, we broke the kiss, and I finished undoing the tie on her back. I pulled the dress down to her knees and finally took it away. I walked into the bathroom, and after we were done bathing, I carried her out of the bathroom and returned to our room. I dried her off with a towel and couldn't stop myself from kissing her. She kissed me back. This was undoubtedly the best of my life. I pulled Nora into my arms and made her place her head on my chest. She was sweating profusely and was trying to catch her breath. Silently, we stayed in each other's arms, catching our breaths. After a moment, our breathing became steady. I placed a kiss on her forehead before asking, "Are you okay?" She nodded in response. A relieved smile appeared on my face as I held her tighter. This was supposed to be my happy ending, but I just couldn't shake the feelings that trouble lurked around. Nora's POV 2 months later. Madison and I are back from Paris, where we went for our honeymoon. We have settled in Madison's kingdom, and he has resumed his duties as the Lord of the Hybrids. Meanwhile, I have been staying at home, working on drafts for my new book while waiting for my coronation as his queen, which is scheduled to take place in the next 2 months during the full moon. I rarely get to see Lord Madison as he has been busy with his duties and hasn't had much time to spend with me. We usually only see each other during breakfast, lunch, dinner, and bedtime. I understand that being the Lord of the Hybrids comes with numerous responsibilities. Leo? I'm learning to forget about him. I mean, he has also forgotten about me. Every day, no matter how hard I try, his hurtful words keep buzzing in my head. It feels like I can still hear him saying those words to me. Occasionally, I dream about him, but when I wake up, I tend to forget what I dreamt, although I know the dream was about him. Our mate bond is still active, no matter how hard I try to suppress it. Every so often, I feel like Leo is in pain, but I just can't wrap my head around it. Leo is the past, Madison is the future. My wolf would always say that to me, and now I have grown to accept it. With a groan, I sat on my bed, feeling bored and sighing. There was nothing for me to do, and everything seemed dull without Madison here. Since I couldn't find anything else to occupy myself, I grew tired and decided to pay him a visit in his office, which was a room in the mansion. I wanted to surprise him and make sure he's captivated when he sees me. I got up from the bed and went to the wardrobe, where I picked a red off-shoulder gown that stopped just above my knees. The gown hugged my body perfectly. I let my already loose hair fall to the side, brushing it aside. Afterward, I stood in front of the mirror, glancing at myself and noticing the changes pregnancy had brought to my body. I rubbed my stomach and smiled. There was a slight change in the growth of my stomach, although it wasn't very obvious yet. My breasts had grown bigger, and my facial appearance had also changed, making me look more mature while still maintaining my usual look. "Hang in there, baby," I muttered as I rubbed my stomach with a smile. I walked to the dresser and applied a touch of makeup on my face, opting for nude lipstick. Then, I assessed myself in the mirror again. Satisfied with my appearance, I smiled and left the room, heading toward the stairs. To my surprise, as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I found my entire family in the sitting room with Madison. They all turned their heads toward me. "Honey, you're here. I was just about to call for you," Madison said. I furrowed my brow, puzzled, and made my way towards them. Firstly, I stared at my mother, who had a weak and nervous smile on her face. Then, my gaze met Vera, who smiled at me, but I didn't respond to it. I held my father's gaze and saw the expressionless look on his face. Finally, I met eyes with Maxwell, who smiled, and I smiled back at him before turning my gaze to Madison. "I invited them over for lunch. It was a surprise for you," he pleaded, hoping I wouldn't get angry at him. But I wasn't mad, I was just surprised to see them. The last time I saw them was 2 months ago during my wedding, and I didn't have much interaction with them, except for Maxwell, who walked me down the aisle. Taking a deep breath, I smiled. "You're welcome to our home. Please take a seat," I said, gesturing for them to sit down. They complied, and I took a seat, with Madison sitting beside me. "Are you angry?" he asked through our mind link. "No, dear," I truthfully responded. "Nora, you look so beautiful. It seems Lord Madison is taking care of you," Maxwell said, and Madison chuckled and placed a kiss on my cheek. "Of course, she is my most valuable possession. What do you expect?" Madison responded, and I beamed. I waved at a maid and asked her when lunch would be ready. She informed me that it wouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I asked her to bring refreshments while we waited. "The meal will be ready soon," I announced, and they hummed in acknowledgement. Silence filled the whole place until Maxwell broke the silence. "Nora, your family has something to say. Do you mind listening?" he asked, and I nodded, urging them to go on. My dad was the first to speak. "Nora, my dear," he called, and I held his gaze. His eyes were filled with emotions, and the one that stood out vividly was remorse. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked, and I gulped. "I wasn't really the father I should have been to you for the past years. I should have spoken up when you were little. I should have told the truth and not kept silent that day." He paused and took a deep breath. "While you were growing up, I was filled with guilt, and yet I couldn't stand up for you when you were being bullied and mistreated by your mother and sister. I should have stepped up and been your knight in shining armor, but I didn't. Instead, I just sat and watched you go through all that." He paused, and I could see tears welling up in his eyes, ready to fall. "Nora, I'm so sorry, my dear child. I'm sorry for not trusting you when I should have. I'm sorry for not standing up for you like I should have. I'm sorry for not telling the truth that day. Can you find a place in your kind heart and forgive me?" he asked, and I blinked my eyes repeatedly, stopping myself from crying. Next, my mother spoke. "Nora," she called, but I didn't look her way. I was filled with pain, and unpleasant memories began playing in my head. "I don't know how to say it, Nora. Where should I begin?" she sniffed, and I still didn't look her way. "I failed you as a mother, Nora. Because of me, you never once experienced the love of a mother while growing up. I hated you and showed you hatred for silly reasons, for something you never did. I caused you a lot of pain, Nora. I made you shed tears every single day. I caused you so much pain, and I wonder if you will ever forgive me, Nora. Can you ever forgive this woman who has caused you nothing but pain? She asked, and I sniffed. Lord Madison moved closer to me and gently massaged my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Nora. I'm sorry for all the terrible things I said and did to you, Nora. It's okay if you don't want to have anything to do with me, but my heart would be at ease knowing that you've forgiven me. Please, Nora, find a place in your large heart and forgive me. I gulped at her words and then shifted my gaze to Vera, who was already crying. She lifted her gaze to meet mine. A series of emotions filled her eyes, but the one that stood out vividly was pain. I watched her leave her seat and fall to her knees. Nora, my sister, she called, and droplet of tears fell on my cheek. This was basically the first time she called me this for the past 19 years. I'm so sorry, she sobbed loudly. You've always shown me nothing but love and kindness. You've always put me first in anything, despite how I treated you, she sobbed, and her body shook with pain. Tears kept falling on my cheek while Lord Madison comforted me by massaging my shoulders. I took so many things from you, from your parents' love to your boyfriend, and also she gulped and didn't say, but I knew she meant to say Leo. Nora, I have caused you nothing but pain, but you've always been there silently supporting and loving me. Despite all I did to you, you still came for me in my darkest moment. She paused and lowered her head to the ground. I'm your twin sister. I'm supposed to be your other half, showing love to you, but what did I do? I caused you nothing but pain, and the moon goddess has punished me dearly for it. She sobbed uncontrollably, and Maxwell comforted her. After a moment, she gathered her emotions and looked up at me. Please Nora, please forgive me. You can decide not to talk to me, all I just want is your forgiveness, Nora. I won't be able to live with this guilt in my heart, knowing that you still have grudges against me. Please Nora, my dear sister, find a place in your heart and forgive me, forgive us, your family. Nora's POV. Everyone remained silent as they waited for me to speak. I didn't know what to say. These people had caused me nothing but pain. However, I knew they were family, and I couldn't hold grudges against them even if I wanted to. With a deep breath, I stared at Madison, who gave me a pleading look. It was obvious he wanted me to make peace with them. Maybe it's time to let go, Lolita said. I hummed and took a deep breath. You all have wronged me in several ways, but what can I do? You are family, and I love you all, I said, taking another deep breath while Lord Madison kept massaging my shoulder. I hold no grudges against anyone. With a heavy sigh, I looked at each of them, their pleading eyes filled with remorse and desperation. The pain and hurt I had carried for so long seemed to weigh me down, but in that moment, a part of me felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just maybe, forgiveness could heal the wounds that had been festering for years. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I spoke softly, my voice filled with a mix of emotions. I won't deny that you have caused me immense pain, that the scars you left behind are still there. But I also believe in the power of forgiveness, not just for your sake, but for my own healing as well. I looked at each of them, my family, who had hurt me deeply. Dad, Mom, Vera. I forgive you. I forgive you for the pain you caused, for the love that was absent, and for the silence that haunted my childhood. Tears welled up in my eyes as I continued, my voice trembling. And Vera, My dear sister, I forgive you too. I forgive you for the jealousy, the betrayal, and the pain. We may be twins, but we are also individuals who make mistakes. I hope that we can find a way to rebuild our relationship, to support and love each other genuinely. I said, and Vera nodded, sobbing loudly. Thank you, Nora, Dad was the first to speak, and I nodded. I held Mother's gaze and noticed she was at a loss for words, but the tears streaming down her cheeks spoke volumes. I took a deep breath and composed myself, not wanting to let my emotions get the best of me. My lady, lunch is served, a maid announced. I nodded and turned to my family. Lunch is ready, we should go and eat. I offered, stood to my feet, and they all followed suit. We all sat at the table and ate silently. The lunch was quiet, but it wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. After we finished eating and desserts, we left the dining room, and I escorted them to the door. I'll be upstairs, Madison placed a kiss on my cheek before leaving. We stood at the door, and no one said a word until Vera broke the silence. We are passing the night in Maxwell's apartment and leaving tomorrow, Vera announced, as if she was reading my thoughts. I nodded and shifted my gaze to Father. He had an expressionless look on his face, but I knew all this was taking a toll on him. Unexpectedly, I gave him a quick hug and pulled away. I did the same with Mother, but I stayed longer in her arms. It was strange to be in her embrace, but it was also comforting. I pulled away and stared at Vera before we gave each other a tight hug. I lingered longer as tears welled up in my eyes. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine such a day would come. I pulled away and flashed them a warm and genuine smile. I have forgiven you all, and I do hope that you learn to forgive yourselves, I said, staring directly at Vera, who nodded. Am I not also part of the family? Maxwell murmured, and we laughed before he pulled me into a hug. Thanks, he whispered and pulled away. We smiled at each other before they turned to leave, but Maxwell asked them to wait for him in the car. When they left, he turned and faced me. Is something wrong? I asked, and he shook his head. I'm just curious, have you heard from Alpha Leo? He asked, and I frowned. Why would I hear from him? I asked, and Maxwell sighed. It's just that, he paused and went silent before taking a deep breath. Nora, are you happy? He asked, and I furrowed my eyebrows, wondering what he meant. Yes, I am. Why would you ask that? I asked, curious, and he just smiled. If you're happy, then it's okay. Your happiness is all that matters. I'll see you around. He placed a kiss on my forehead and walked away even before I could ask him what was happening. Don't you think something was odd? I asked Lolita, who suggested I let it be. Shrugging my shoulders, I climbed the stairs to our room, where I found Madison on his phone, texting someone. The moment I walked in, he put away the phone and smiled at me. You've seen them off? He asked, and I nodded, sitting on his lap while I wrapped my hands around his neck. I think my baby in your womb is making you heavier, he teased and placed a kiss on my stomach, while I rolled my eyes and playfully swatted his arm. Don't blame it on the baby. You know you love having me in your lap, I teased. He chuckled, his hands resting on my waist. Of course, my love. I wouldn't have it any other way. His eyes sparkled with a genuine smile. Leaning in, I pressed my forehead against his. Thank you for always being there for me, Madison. I don't know what I would do without you. He placed a gentle kiss on my lips, his touch sending a series of cold shivers down my spine. You don't have to thank me, Nora. It's my duty and privilege to be here for you. You are my mate, and I love you, and I'll always support you." He spoke sincerely, and I smiled and sealed my lips with his, this time more passionately. Slowly, I straddled his knees while facing him, making direct eye contact. I sat down on his lap, using his knees to support myself as I gyrated over him in a squatting position. Seductively, I grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him closer to me, kissing him again. He groaned between the kiss and squeezed my ass, causing a moan to escape my lips. Our tongues fought for dominance until I gave up and allowed him. Breaking from the kiss, I left his lap and began undressing in front of him, maintaining eye contact. As I undressed, I saw him cast a lustful gaze at me and smirked, causing my cheeks to heat up. After undressing, I knelt and unzipped his pants before pulling them down along with his underwear to his feet. Then, I climbed on him and held his gaze. "You're becoming naughty," he teased, and I smirked. Lord Madison hugged me tightly and slowly caressed my hair while I steadied my breath. This was hot and unreal. "That was amazing, you were amazing," he praised and pulled me to meet his gaze. He pecked my lips and smiled. "Do you want to take a bath?" he asked, and I nodded. Still in his arms, he stood up on his feet while I wrapped my legs around him. We got to the bathroom and bathed each other, not missing any opportunity to kiss or make out. After bathing, we dried our bodies and lay on the bed. Feeling exhausted, I drifted off to sleep. I didn't know how long I had been asleep, but when I woke up, it was dark, and Madison wasn't in bed. Slowly, I got off the bed and tied a robe. Just as I was about to go to the bathroom, I heard a phone ringing. Thinking it was my phone, I turned towards the sound, only to realize it was Madison's phone. We had the same iPhone ringtone. When I noticed it wasn't my phone, I turned and intended to ignore it. But, a call kept coming in, and out of curiosity, I picked it up. I noticed that the caller was Lord Frederick, the Lord of the Vampires. Him calling at this time meant that something might be wrong and needed urgent attention. So, I picked up the phone to take it to Madison, but it ended quickly, and then I noticed an unread notification. It was from Alpha Leo. Normally, I would have ignored it if it were someone else, but it was Leo, and I was curious to know what he had sent. The phone was locked, but luckily, I could still read the message. So, with curiosity, I scrolled down the screen and read the first lines of the message. "I have seen your countless messages, Madison. I'm doing fine. You should stop reaching out to me. I blocked you from accessing me through the mind link, and I would do the same on the phone. Nora is now yours, stick to her. What I did was the best for her and should be kept a secret from her. Stop contacting me." I furrowed my brow and stared at the message while continuing to read it over and over again, trying to understand what the text meant. What did Leo do that was the best for me? And what is being kept a secret from me? As I asked myself those questions, the door opened, and Madison walked in and noticed his phone in my hand. He gulped nervously and held my gaze. "Lord Madison," I called, taking a step closer to him. "What does this mean?" I said, showing him the phone and noticing his uneasiness as he gulped, not knowing what to say. "Answer me," I demanded, frustrated and losing my patience. Nora's POV. So many questions buzzed in my head, but I just couldn't wrap my head around an answer as I wondered what was going on. What were they hiding from me? I looked up at Madison, waiting to get a response or explanation from him, but I got nothing. Instead, he looked tense and worried, fueling my curiosity even more. "Madison? I'm waiting for a response." What secret are you both keeping away from me? And don't you dare lie to me, I warned, seeing the uneasiness on his face. However, he didn't say a word. Madison! I called out impatiently. Nora, I can explain. Just calm down and allow me to explain, he pleaded worriedly. Let him explain, Lolita pleaded, and I took a deep breath, sitting on the bed, waiting for him to speak. He remained silent for a long time, making me impatient and anxious, but I kept waiting until I heard him take a deep breath and sit beside me. It wasn't my idea, Nora. It was Leo's, he began, while I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Nora, when you were kidnapped, Leo was aware of it. The truth is that Leo never traveled, he said, causing me to stare at him with shock. Yes, Nora, Leo was involved in every step of rescuing you. In fact, he was the one who helped in getting Ava. He played a major role in rescuing you and was the one who burnt your kidnapper to ashes, along with other rogues, he said, causing my heart to pound in my chest. Nora, Leo didn't mean what he said to you that day. He said all that because we realized you were pregnant, and he didn't want to complicate emotions, he explained while I remained calm, trying to process all I had just heard from him. Leo helped in saving me? I asked, and Madison nodded. He killed my kidnappers? I asked, and Madison nodded again, causing me to flare up. And you didn't bother to tell me, Madison? You decided to keep it a secret. I yelled and stood to my feet. You knew Leo rescued me, and you just stood there and watched me say those hurtful words to him. I yelled and ruffled my hair with my fingers. The hurtful words I said to him came back, and I couldn't stop myself from regretting and wondering what he might have gone through. The pain of hearing that I was pregnant with Madison's child, a pain which was familiar to me. I knew how hurtful it was to me, and I wondered what he might have gone through. What about my marriage? He must have drowned in pain the day I was getting married. Seeing me getting married must have hurt him a lot, but he didn't bother because he wanted my happiness. Nora, no, Madison. Don't get close to me, I warned with anger. How long did you intend to keep this from me? I asked with anger and pain. You knew what he might go through, and you still let him do it just because of your selfish gain. I yelled with anger. Why didn't you say it? Why didn't you tell me the truth? You were supposed to tell me the truth, but rather you let me find out myself, I spoke bitterly and groaned. I began pacing the room and felt so suffocated. My heart was racing, and I was feeling uneasy. Calm down, Nora. Please calm down, Madison pleaded, but his words only made me even angrier. Don't tell me to calm down, Lord Madison. Don't you dare tell me, I spat in anger and continued pacing around, while I thought of what to do. How do I get myself out of this mess? How do I undo everything? I kept pacing around before I finally stood before him with anger burning in my eyes. You are really selfish, Madison. You knew, and you could have stopped him, but you decided to let him go on with those plans, so it would be beneficial for you. You wanted to have me by all means, even by lying and deceiving me. I yelled and saw pain in his eyes, but I didn't stop. So you thought lying to me was the best solution? Deceiving me into believing Leo didn't care about me anymore? How could you think that would lead to a happy, healthy relationship? You know you had a chance. You had the chance to have me and win over Leo, but you decided to deceive me into hating Leo and marrying you. I yelled. Enough, he yelled. That's enough, Nora, he yelled and stood to his feet. I have had enough, Nora. Don't say more, he spoke, filled with anger and bitterness. Why do you blame me for everything, Nora? Why can't you just see reason with me? I have told you that it wasn't my idea to come up with this plan. Leo came up with it because he thought it was the best for you. So why are you so angry about it and putting the blame on me? He spat, and I remained silent, waiting for him to finish. I get it, Nora. I get it that you don't love me like you love Leo. Leo has been the one you are head over heels for, and me? I'm just a side mate who you run to. I furrowed my brow, wondering what he was saying. Yes, Nora, you don't love me. These past 2 months, you decided to love me because you thought Leo didn't want you anymore, so you clung on to me. But now that you know the truth, you are fuming with anger and can't wait to be with him, he yelled and roughly ran his fingers through his hair. I get it. You are supposed to be angry that we kept such a thing from you. But if you really loved me, you wouldn't have taken it this far. He paused and took a deep breath. The truth is, Nora, you never loved me. I can't tell what you feel for me, but it's definitely not love. As Madison's words pierced through me, I felt a mix of emotions surge within me. Anger, confusion, and sadness overwhelmed me. How could he say such things? How could he doubt my feelings for him? Madison, you're wrong, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and frustration. I do love you. I love you with all my heart, and I thought you knew that. He scoffed bitterly, his eyes filled with disappointment. Love doesn't make you treat someone this way, Nora. Love doesn't make you question their intentions and put all the blame on them. Love is supposed to be understanding, supportive, and forgiving. But all I see from you is anger and resentment, he spat, and I shook my head while tears welled up in my eyes. Nora, I love you, but I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me, who doubts my intentions at every turn. I need to be with someone who truly loves me, not someone who settles for me because they think they can't have someone else, he said, while I became confused as my anger turned into fear. What? I began, but he interrupted me. Nora, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could be the one for you, even if it meant being second best. But I can't ignore the fact that you never loved me the way you loved Leo. It's not fair to either of us to continue like this. He sucked in a deep breath and averted his gaze from me. I watched as he hesitated for a moment before returning his gaze to me. Let's get a divorce, Nora. You are not made queen yet, so it wouldn't be that hard, he said, and my heart skipped a beat in my chest. What are you? I stammered, struggling to find my words. You heard me right, Nora. Let's call off this marriage. Just like you've said, this marriage is based on lies and not love, so why stay in it? He asked, but I shook my head and moved towards him, only for him to take a step back. Madison, I pleaded, but he cut me off. Nora, this is the best choice for us. If you're worried about the pregnancy, you shouldn't be. That baby is mine, and I will be with you every step of his life. His words left me dumbfounded, rendering me speechless. I felt my body go numb as I processed what he was saying to me. My lawyer will contact you, but until then, you can still stay here, if you want to, he said, and with those words, he walked out on me, leaving me unable to utter a single word, still stunned by what had just happened. Nora, Nora! My wolf called out to me, pulling me back from my panicked daze. What are you doing standing here? Go to him and tell him that everything he's saying is wrong. She urged, and I quickly snapped out of my shocked state and headed for the door. I left the room and hurriedly descended the stairs to the living room, where I met a servant. Where is Lord Madison? I asked. He just walked out the door, my lady, she responded, and I quickly left the sitting room, only to find him driving out. Nora's POV. I paced up and down the house, anxiously waiting for Madison to return home after he angrily left earlier in the day. It was already midnight, and I grew increasingly worried as he hadn't come back yet. It's 1:18 am, I mumbled as I checked the time, my pacing becoming more frantic. What was keeping him out so late at night? I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang for a few seconds, but he didn't answer. Why won't you pick up my call, Madison? I blurted out, frustration building up inside me. Maybe I should try a mind link. I closed my eyes and attempted to connect with him, but he blocked me. I tried again and again, but he continued to block me, making it impossible to reach him, no matter how hard I tried. You shouldn't have said those words to him. They were too harsh. Lolita mumbled calmly to me, sensing my tense mood and probably wanting to avoid worsening it. I ran my fingers through my hair and sat on the bed. I was just surprised. I was shocked that he could keep such a big secret from me when he calls me his wife. I never meant to be so harsh, I replied, hanging my head. I didn't mean anything I said. I just hope he will come back soon, so we can sort things out. This is not what I want at all, I added, taking a deep breath with my head still lowered. Lost in self-pity, the door opened, and Madison walked in. Madison! I called out, instantly standing up from the bed and rushing over to him. Where have you been? I couldn't sleep waiting for you. You could have called me to let me know you would come home late. How are you? I bombarded him with questions, trying to make him talk to me, as I opened my arms, wanting to hug him. However, he pushed me aside and walked past me. Maddie, I was about to call his name again when my sensitive nose caught the smell of alcohol emanating from him. He's drunk. I mumbled to myself, as if confirming what I already knew. Why are you being so harsh, Madison? Don't you think you're taking this too far? I asked, hoping he would reply, but to no avail. I moved closer to him and stood in front of him again. We need to talk, Madison. You have to talk to me. We can't continue like this without resolving this issue, I pleaded, but he only stared at me without uttering a word. Are you drunk? Did you go drinking after you left me today? Did you get yourself drunk because you didn't want to face me? I asked, my voice sounding gentle even though I was battling many emotions, trying to make him realize I was sorry. Madison, I called again, realizing he wasn't going to respond. I was about to approach him when he stretched his hand forward, signaling for me to stop, and took a step back. Can you just stop? I'm not in the right frame of mind to discuss anything with you right now, can't you see that? Can you give me some space, please? He muttered, looking straight into my eyes with a hidden pain. I don't want to do anything that I'll regret when I sober up in the morning. So, can you just let me be for now, he added, and I sighed, doing my best not to cry. With that, he pushed me aside and walked past me again. I watched him climb the stairs without looking back, and my knees grew weak, causing me to slump to the ground. Madison! I called gently as I watched him disappear completely from my sight, tears streaming down my cheeks. I wiped the tears away, but more kept flowing, and before I knew it, I held my chest and started sobbing uncontrollably, disregarding everything else. The pain coursing through me was too much to bear, and crying felt like the only way to release some of it and be able to breathe again. After a few minutes had passed, I stood up and wiped my face. I shouldn't be crying like this, I said to myself and followed him. I reached our room and searched around, but he was nowhere to be found. Where is he? Where did he go again? I asked myself as I continued searching. I left our room and started looking for him, but still couldn't find him. Where is he? I asked once more, and that's when I heard a sound coming from the guest room. I rushed toward the guest room and tried to open the door, but it was locked. Did I hear wrong? Is he not here? I asked myself, but Lolita replied, he's in there. Madison? Can you open the door and let's talk, please? We can sort out this whole thing. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice filled with pain, but all I received was total silence. Madison wasn't replying to me. I sighed and leaned on the door. What do I do? I asked my wolf. You might need to leave him for tonight and postpone everything else until tomorrow. I don't think tonight is the right time for any discussion, Lolita advised me, and my head dropped. You can talk to him tomorrow. I'm sure he will be more understanding then. Can you do that? Lolita asked, and I sighed. Okay, I will do that then, I reluctantly replied, standing up and leaving the door, but not without glancing at it with each step I took away. I entered the room and forced myself to sleep. The night felt longer than usual as my mind raced. I couldn't wait for morning to come so I could talk to him and resolve all this misunderstanding. Very early the next morning, I woke up, quickly took a bath, put on a simple long gown, and rushed out of the room. I arrived at the guest room with a smile on my face and knocked, but there was no response. I frowned and opened the door, only to find that no one was there. Where is he? I asked myself as I left the guest room and walked down the stairs. Fortunately, I saw one of the maids cleaning the seats and approached her. Don't worry about greetings, I said as soon as I saw her attempting to bow. Do you know where Lord Madison is? I asked the maid, and she nodded. Yes, he's in his office. He left very early, ma'am, the maid replied, and I nodded before rushing toward the office, hoping desperately to find him there. Upon reaching the office, I knocked on the door, but there was no response. We're getting used to this no-response attitude lately, I said sadly. Madison, are you in there? Can I come in? I asked, but still, there was no response, and I let out a deep breath. I'm coming in then, I announced, opening the door and entering. Entering the room, I saw Madison in his seat, his eyes fixed on the files he was holding. He concentrated so hard that he paid me no attention, even after I opened the door and entered. He didn't even raise his head to look at me, sparing me no glance as if I meant nothing to him. My heart sank, but I shook my head and moved closer to him. Dear, good morning, I greeted, but there was no response. I tried speaking with you yesterday, but you shunned me and locked yourself in. Do you know how worried I was? You could have at least said something nice so I could sleep well, I tried joking with him, hoping he would laugh, but it was futile once again. Seeing him act mute when I was doing my best to settle the issue between us was already getting on my nerves, but I remained calm. Regarding what I said yesterday, I understand why you're so angry, but can you at least give me a chance to explain myself? I didn't mean what I said yesterday, and as for Leo, I stopped loving him the moment I was interrupted by his sudden groan as he looked at me. I don't want to hear it. I'm tired, Nora. I'm tired of all this, he yelled at me, and my heart sank. Tired? Do you mean what you said about divorce yesterday? I asked, my heart beating fast against my chest, desperately hoping he would say no. But he looked straight into my eyes, and without hesitation, he replied, "Yes, I'm letting you go, Nora." Lord Madison's POV. Yes, I'm letting you go, Nora. I tried my best to act as cold as possible so she would get my message, but the tears that ran down her face weakened me. "I want to set you free, Nora. It's obvious you don't love me but someone else, and this marriage, as you said, was based on lies. This is the best time to make a decision, and I think letting each other go is the best decision we can make right now," I added, still staring straight into her eyes. Her eyes flickered, and she took a step backward. It seemed she wanted to say something, but nothing was coming out of her mouth, and her tears kept rolling down. Without saying anything, she ran toward the door and left my office. I grunted and ran my fingers through my hair. Every part of me wanted to rush after her, hug her, and tell her to forget everything I said, but I knew I shouldn't do that. "Why are you doing this? You should go and tell her you don't mean it." My wolf, Darren, scolded me, but I shook my head. That isn't something I should do. Remember what I went through with Gracie, too. Now, it's Nora. I trailed off as I rested my head on my seat and closed my eyes. I've always been the one loving too much, only to get heartbroken in the end. I'm tired, Darren. I'm tired of getting broken over and over again, I explained to Darren, and I let out a deep breath. Making this decision wasn't easy for me, but no matter how I think about it, it seems to be the best choice for me. "I'm losing my mind," I grumbled. Lowering my head, I realized there were a lot of papers I needed to go through and sign. I sucked in a deep breath. I should just work and take my mind off all this. I hope this will work. I began reading and signing the contract, doing my best to divert my mind from other things besides my work. However, it wasn't as easy as I had thought, as my thoughts kept wandering to her now and then. My mind was consumed with thoughts of her, and nothing was going well with my work. Frustrated, I slammed the files I was holding on the table and grabbed my head, exclaiming, "What is she doing right now? Where is she? Is she all right? Ugh! There's so much I want to know." I groaned and stood up from my seat, feeling like I was going crazy. Realizing that I wouldn't be able to focus on anything until I cleared my mind of her, I dropped the files I was holding, organized them properly, and walked toward the door. "I'll just check on her and then return to continue my work," I said, trying to comfort myself, although I knew it wasn't helping in any way. I had my hand on the doorknob for a few seconds before I managed to gather my thoughts, open the door, and leave the office. She should be in our room, I thought, heading to our room to check if she was there, as that was the first place that came to my mind. Unfortunately, she wasn't there. I checked the bathroom and every other place in the room where I expected her to be, but she was nowhere to be found. "Nora!" I called out, but there was no response. "She isn't here. Where could she be?" I asked myself as I walked out of our room, searching for her. I searched the guest room where I had slept the previous night, went to the kitchen, and checked every other place my mind led me to, but she wasn't there either. My heart started racing, and I became restless. "Where are you, Nora?" I uttered, my voice filled with worry. I continued searching for her, and that was when I spotted her in the garden. She had her back turned to me, but I could see her shoulders moving. What is she doing? I wondered, and then it dawned on me. Was she crying? I moved closer to her without letting her know, and I realized that she was indeed crying. She had her hand covering her mouth, trying to muffle her tears as she wept bitterly in the garden. Seeing her like that made my heart ache. My mind was shaken, and I blamed myself for causing her so much pain. Should I just stop it here? And I stopped in the middle of my sentence and shook my head. Clenching my fist, I turned my back to her as a single tear ran down my face. I shouldn't follow my heart this time. I shouldn't go back on my word. This is the best for both of us, for me and her, I tried to advise myself as my veins throbbed, my body longing to comfort Nora. I held myself back and watched her sob for a few minutes until I couldn't bear it any longer. I quietly left the garden, making sure she had no idea I had come for her. I returned to the sitting room and sat on one of the couches. This is for the best, I said to myself again, rubbing my face with my hand. It wasn't long after that when Nora entered and walked up to me. Her eyes were puffy and filled with sadness, but she was no longer crying. "Madison," she called, and I raised an eyebrow, finding it difficult to speak first. She swallowed and took a deep breath. She stood in front of me for a while without saying a word, then cleared her throat. "Madison," she called again. "It's unfortunate that you don't know how I feel about you, and you don't seem to care either. You don't know what I'm going through, having two different mates and experiencing conflicting emotions all the time. It's not easy for me at all, and I've been doing my best to not make it a problem for anyone, but I know I haven't done enough." She paused and wiped the tears from her face. "I know you must have been through a lot, thinking that I don't love you or that I love someone else more than you, while I've been trying my best to show you that you're the only one I love." "Well," she raised her head to look into my eyes. "If a divorce is what you want and you believe it's best for us, then I have no choice but to agree with you. I will sign the divorce papers as you wish," she added, forcing a bitter smile, and turned to leave. "What are you doing, Madison? Go after her and stop her. Will you just let her go like that?" "Madison!" Darren screamed at me, urging me to change my mind, but I was too broken to even move. "She's only like this because she's sad. She doesn't want to leave you, can't you see?" he added, but I shook my head. "I don't want to go after her, Darren. I shouldn't do that. I've made the best decision I can make, and I shouldn't back down now. Letting her go is the best thing I can do for her," I uttered, pressing my hand against my forehead to ease the headache that was already making me sick. I checked the time and realized it was still very early. I should continue with my work. "That will help me get through this," I said to myself as I stood up. My eyes drifted in the direction Nora had left from, and I sighed. "I should go and work," I mumbled again before finding my way back to my office. "Work. Work is the only way I can survive this," I kept repeating to myself as I walked empty-heartedly to my office. I was a few steps away from my office when I heard a voice in my head. "Leo!" I called out. The voice was familiar, and I knew it was Leo's, but I wondered why he suddenly reached out to me. "What's the matter, Leo?" I asked, trying my best to sound as calm as possible, as the last thing I wanted was to let Leo know when I hadn't even sorted out my own feelings yet. "Madison, what's wrong with Nora? Is she okay?" Leo asked me through our mind link, and my eyes twitched. "Why? Why do you ask?" I inquired, and he remained silent for a while. "My wolf feels uneasy here, and the only reason could be that something is wrong with Nora." "Is she all right?" Leo questioned, growing impatient this time, which made my heart race for some unknown reason. "This has been happening for a few hours now, and it doesn't seem like it's going to subside soon," Leo further lamented. I let out a deep breath, ran my fingers roughly through my hair, and groaned. "Why don't you just ask her directly instead of asking me?" Just go to her! I yelled with frustration. Having to go through all of this was harsh enough for me, but answering questions was tougher. Wait, does she already know about the rescuing stuff? He asked, but I gave no reply, which gave him the answer he wanted, and he groaned. Why would you do that? Can't you even keep that a secret from her? He yelled angrily. I didn't tell her anything. I sucked in a deep breath and controlled my emotions. She found out herself, and I had no option but to tell her the truth, I replied with my head lowered. Leo was quiet for a while before asking. So, why is she in so much pain? That's because I asked her for a divorce, I replied almost immediately. Are you mad? Have you lost your mind? You promised to take care of her, Madison. Leo hollered at me, and my head ached. Alpha Leo's POV. My anger surged, and I felt like scolding Madison more, but I decided to keep my calm as I ended the mind link. I paced around the room, thinking of what to do as my mind wasn't at rest after hearing that Madison had asked for a divorce from Nora even after I warned him to take care of her and make sure he doesn't break her heart. What will you do now? Madison has made up his mind to divorce Nora, are you going to just let her be? Ethan asked me and I let out a deep breath. I don't know what to do at all. For the past 2 months, I've been struggling to forget about her and move on with my life, and now that I think I'm forgetting her, I don't want anything that will attach me to her and bring back all the emotions I had buried away. I can't afford to start loving her again, Ethan. I replied to my wolf, who seemed to be just as bothered as I was. Ethan was quiet for a while, and when I thought he wasn't going to say anything anymore, I heard his voice again. I understand. It's not easy, but I'm feeling uncomfortable. She shouldn't remain sad like this. Ethan lamented and my head ached. I pressed my hand on my forehead and grunted. I can't interfere more than this, Ethan. You heard the conversation between Madison and me, and it was obvious they already decided. What do I do? I asked back, frustration filling me up. I was still waiting for Ethan's reply when I heard a knock on the door, and I sighed. I walked over to the nearest seat to me and sat down. Come in, I said after clearing my throat. The door opened and Ava came in. She stopped in front of me and frowned when she saw the worried look on my face. What's wrong? You look worried. Are you okay? She asked me. I sucked in a deep breath and ran my fingers through my hair. It's Nora. She has been sad since yesterday, and it's making my wolf uncomfortable. I complained, and could see Eva's frown getting deeper. Nora? What happened to her? She questioned and I sighed again. Something came up between Madison and her, and he demanded a divorce. I don't know if he would do that. I don't know why he would ask for something so stupid when he could have solved it patiently. I uttered, anger evident in my voice. Ava sighed. She moved closer to me and sighed again. This is crazy. She grumbled. But, why is your wolf uncomfortable? Haven't you gotten over her? I raised my head at that question, but I couldn't say a word as I was completely speechless and somehow embarrassed. I thought I had forgotten about her too. I thought I could move on without her in my life, and I never thought she could still affect me this much, but getting to this junction, I felt like a joke to myself. I thought so, too. I strongly believed I had moved on, but I can see it was all in my head, a total baseless imagination. The fact that she's so unhappy right now is making me restless. I explained, while I tried my best to not show too much of my emotions. What will you do now? What are your plans? Ava asked me supportively, but I could only shake my head. I don't know. I've been confused about what to do, but I still can't find a solution, no matter how hard I think. I disclosed, and Ava let out a deep breath. She seemed to understand what I was going through at the moment. I fell in deep thought for a while before I shrugged. Maybe I will just have to wait for Nora to reach out to me. If she needs any help, I will be glad to render it. I added and concluded the matter in my mind, but Ava seemed to have more to say as she shook her head and opened her mouth. What if Nora comes to you that she wants you back and wants to be with you, what will you do? Will you take her back too? Eva asked me, and I chuckled. For some reason, the statement sounded funny to my ears, but I knew Ava was asking a serious question because the look in her eyes was completely serious, which made me wonder what was going on, but I shrugged it off and decided to reply to her. Well, no way that will happen. She is Madison's mate, and she's even carrying his child. Being together with her is something that can never happen. I explained, and for a second, I could see the delight in Ava's face, but it disappeared as fast as it came. Did I imagine it? Seeing that the conversation had ended, I stood up to leave the room, but I sat back and cleared my throat. Lest I forget, what brings you here? I asked. I remembered she couldn't have come to me to comfort me when she had no idea what I was passing through before seeing me. Ava smiled and glanced around my study before turning back to face me. Nothing. I just came here today to check on you as I haven't seen you in a while, but I'm happy I came anyway. What are you doing right now? Ava said sweetly and questioned, but it only made me frown. Sitting, of course. I replied with an amused smile on my face. Why would she be asking what I was doing when she saw me sitting? She smiled and shook her head. I can see you are sitting, sir. She said sarcastically. What I meant was that, don't you have anything urgent to do now? She asked again, and I nodded my head. No. Not really. What's it? I demanded. I was thinking we could go out for fresh air and also clear our mind, or what do you think? She inquired with expectant eyes. Your mum told me you've locked yourself in here for days and working without rest. You haven't left your study for a while, and I'm sure you will be missing the outside world. I was thinking. She stopped, glanced around my study again, and smiled. I was thinking we should go out or maybe stroll around the park and clear our heads together. Isn't that a good choice? She asked, while she continued looking at me, expectantly. I stared at her for a few seconds while thinking of the reply to give her. With the look in her eyes, it was obvious she wouldn't take no for an answer, and I knew I needed something to take my mind off Nora too. So, I stood up, walked to my desk, and closed the opened files before turning back to her. Let's quickly do that then, I replied, and she smiled. All right, she mumbled. Immediately I got to her side and together, we left my study. Just around the park, right? I asked her and she nodded. Yes, just around the park. I hope you ain't thinking of bailing out already? She questioned, teasingly, and I shrugged. Who knows, I might just run away before you know it, I replied. Seems like someone has forgotten that I can teleport. She teased back and I chuckled. That's a great skill you have right there. I decided to compliment her. The teleporting ability she had was a rare skill that many alphas would love to own. At times, I do think you're special, I added, and she blushed. That's the first time I'm hearing that, though. She replied and winked, earning a low laugh from me. We continued playing and teasing each other while we walked around the park together. This is all thanks to you, I mumbled, and she looked at me. She raised a brow and blinked. Pardon? I couldn't hear you well. She replied, smiling. I shrugged before hiding my hand in my pocket. Well, I was saying this is all thanks to you. I replied, and she stopped walking as she faced me. Thanks for what? What are you thanking me for? She questioned, and I smiled. It's been a while since I walked the pack like this. Seeing the happy faces of my pack members has elevated my mood, making me feel proud of my achievements. I've done well. I know now. I replied sincerely, but I also made sure to brag a little to keep the playful mood. She nodded her head as she looked around the pack. She seemed to be thinking about something, but whatever it was, I knew it was something that made her happy as the smile on her face only turned wider and wider. You've done well, indeed. You are a role model to the upcoming alphas. She complimented and I raised a brow. She didn't have to compliment me so much when I was only joking, but somehow, it made me smile, and we continued walking again. We went to different corners, different places, and saw a lot of things that made us laugh. This wasn't the usual me, but at that moment, I just wanted to let loose, enjoy myself and forget about everything else, and Ava was helping with that. How about we go to my wood? I asked and she nodded. I would like to shift to my wolf, I added, and she nodded again. We walked into my woods and after going further, I looked at her one more time before taking off my shirt, so I could transform, but what happened next shocked me. Ava moved closer to me and unexpectedly, she pressed her lips on mine. I was shocked, and pushed her away. Have you lost your mind? I yelled at her. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.